everyone, and welcome. This is International Stress Awareness Day 2018, and I am so pleased because I have the honor of talking to Dr. Lynda Shaw today. Dr. Lynda I'm going to introduce you to her because there's a lot to say about her, but I'm going to try to explain a little bit. I know she's an experienced entrepreneur that has owned 3 businesses, including a health club with 2,000 members and many staff. You know, she holds a doctorate in cognitive neuroscience. She is a registered chartered psychologist. She's a Forbes contributor. She's the author of adult and children's books, I believe, and the latest one is Your Brain is Boss, a really interesting how the brain works and how it affects our behavior. She's even a grandmother like I am, so I'm talking to a soulmate. Hello, Dr. Lynda Shaw. Welcome to the International Stress Summit. Nice.
Hello. Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction.
Is there anything that you would like to add, like a personal something that you would like people to know about you?
I'm a travel junkie. I love to get on aeroplanes and I like adventure travel. So I go to some very interesting places in the world and very physical. One of my favourite places was kayaking around the icebergs in Antarctica with my son. So that was just the most amazing trip. But I've done some fabulous trips with both my children and my whole family. In fact, my children, as they were growing, were convinced I was trying to kill them. Because of the, and they get, Mummy, why can't we go on ordinary holidays? Going, no, you keep going. But yeah, I do like to, let's just say I like shiny new balls, and it's like the university of the world is the most magnificent place, and we need to go and explore. So that's what I like doing.
Is your work bringing you, to travel as well?
It does sometimes, but I'm quite discerning about how much I travel with work. I do love it, but equally it can be quite lonely. As a speaker, of course, you're there, you're on the stage, you're doing this wonderful talk, and your audience absolutely love you. Then they want to go off and do their thing with their colleagues and their peers, and you go, oh, okay, but of course it's right. That's how it should be. So it can be quite isolating. So I prefer to travel with my family and loved ones. Okay. That said, I'm also very mindful that the stress of travel, we might take it as with a pinch of salt because it's so easy these days. However, it is stressful. You get to the airport and there's delays and the temperature is wrong and there's queues and there's kids shouting and there's people arguing and people are really wound up because they've been working too hard in preparation of their traveling, and so they're very tense, and then they might be frightened of flying or whatever, and then you're thinking about what you've got to do, and so I'm sort of okay, let's count to 10 here. And don't get me wrong, I love being on aeroplanes, but I am also mindful that we need that balance. So I do some travel for work.
Oh, good. Now, if we talk about the theme of this year, which is does high tech cause high stress? What is your first thing that you would like to say about that? What answer would you like to contribute here?
I think we all know that technology is fast. There are a couple of ways of looking at that. It's fast in the way it develops. So there's always something new to learn. There's the next level, the next hybrid, the next invention, the next whole new system, the next layer upon the old system. There's always something to learn and develop, which is good. The brain needs to keep learning and keep that. That can be quite stressful, especially for somebody who's older, who might be finding that they're fluid and when you're older, we have something called fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. So our crystallized intelligence gets better as we get older because that's about language, that's about things we know, and we improve upon what we know already. But our fluid intelligence is about learning something in a whole new paradigm. Doesn't mean to say when we're older we can't learn it. We certainly can, but it might take us a longer time. And equally, a lot of companies don't invest in people over the age of 30 or 25 even. They're investing in the younger generation in training, which is a shame because the younger people have got, they're progressing, they're growing their lives, and they will be probably leave within 3 years. So the company's investing in training with young people, which is right. But equally, if they invest in older people, they will have more loyalty with those people, and they'll get more return for their investment. So we need to be mindful of what's happening with technology and training people, regardless of their age, and the speed in which that changes. But also, actually using technology is so fast. We don't even write a whole word. We abbreviate the word. It's titchy weeny, little tiny 3 letters, and we all know it. Or an emoji, a face, quick, 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 quick. Everything's fast. So we think we have to respond quickly. Whereas we all know that once upon a time we'd read a letter, think about it for a few days, write it. It'd take another couple of days to get to the recipient. So it could take a week process. And we now squash that down into 3 minutes. It's this speed. It seems to perpetuate the feel that we absolutely need to do it now. Do it quickly, do it now. Why now? Why can't we go make a cup of coffee? Why can't we just go for a quick walk around the block? Why can't we just go into the garden and just sit there for 10 minutes? Why do we need to be so fast? And, we've got Facebook, email, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snap. What do you call this thing when something comes up and it disappears quickly? What do you call that?
Snapchat or something.
It's always something. And each generation, the younger generation, will have this new preference to the other generation for them. So, but it's all fast. And if you've got a post that comes up in front of you that is going to disappear like that, that's going to perpetuate this need, this addiction to having to look now, and that's incredibly stressful. So,
now, I'm very intrigued because you are such a specialist in neuroscience. Now, how did you get involved in that? Is that through a personal experience that you got, interested in more to know about the brain and how the brain reacts and our behavior? Because it all has to do with stress as well. How did you roll into the neuroscience? Is that more from professional kind of route, or was this a personal experience that brought you there?
Since I was 14, I've been reading about consciousness. I'm absolutely fascinated with consciousness and unconscious processing. Always have been. Never thought anything about it. Didn't think anything at all. And then I found myself at university as a mature student, and I wanted to understand, because I'm a traveller. I want to understand why different cultures do what they do. I want to understand why people do what they do. So I wanted to study social anthropology. At the time, my children were really small, so I had to choose a university that was close to home for logistics of school runs and so on and so forth. So I chose a university that was lecturing for undergraduates in social anthropology, but they would only offer a joint honours degree. So I had to choose a second subject at the same time, which could be psychology, communications, or sociology. Okay. I didn't want to do any of them. But I decided, okay, by default, I'll do psychology. So I am now studying psychology and social anthropology, first-class honours degree, and I'm happy, 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 happy. And then I realised how hard social anthropology is, because it's about life. How big a topic can you get than social anthropology? It's like, this is too hard. And I'm a yes, but what if person. So I would be asked to write a 2,000-word essay, and I've written 10,000 words because I've gone off these amazing tangents, and then I have to shrink it down, and I'm like, I hate that. So I found it really, really hard. But I found the psychology easier. So I continued on that. I got my joint honours degree, and then I did a master's in psychology. And my supervisor for my master's, I was looking at his profile on the university website, and his amazing length of expertise. And at the very bottom, it said consciousness. I went, ooh. So I went up to Michael and I said, Michael, consciousness, I said, this is something I'm fascinated with. Would you supervise a PhD? And he said, yes. I was so excited.
Well
Yes.
done.
So, and of course, that was through neuroscience. So I used fMRI scanning equipment and I used behavioral studies, and I got my doctorate in unconscious processing of emotion. So I studied neuroscience that way. So I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, which is about how different parts of the brain and how they respond to different stimuli and so on.
Can you explain to the audience, because I'm very intrigued in that, can you explain to the audience how high tech influences that brain stimulation? That is there an evolvement? Is the more high tech, the more the brain is actually triggered? Or is that not high?
It's the brain. The attention system of the brain is faulty. We can only attend to a small amount of stimuli at any one time, and sometimes our attention system makes us attend to things that are not relevant. Or not. There are other things we should be attending to that are more relevant to the situation. So it's not an absolutely wonderful system. So our attention, if we are attending to technology, we will be ignoring so much else because technology takes so much attention, and our attention span is getting shorter because of the speed in which we're having to move. Now, some people think they can do lots of things at any one time, that they can multitask. We can't multitask. It's actually a myth. What we do is we switch. So you could be, for instance, emailing, and you could be on your phone. And I will promise you that you cannot email and talk at the same time. What you would do is you would type, and then you would speak. You would type, and then you would speak. And there will be a rapid switch between the two. The trade-off for that is that we don't do it properly, or we do it slower. So our email won't be as good, or our conversation won't be as good, or we'll be slower at responding or do something. So there is a trade-off when we are using anything that is taking our attention in two ways. But attention is all about conscious processing. So there's an awful lot we do that we can do all at the same time, but that's below conscious awareness. Things that have become habitual. Empty the dishwasher, put the kettle on, make coffee, do the washing machine, all unconscious, and you could still be on the phone in perfect conversation. So, that's one of the problems with what's going on in the brain is our attention system actually is having to concentrate so much on the speed in which we are operating that we can't do this switching thing, but we still wander off. We wander off, and rather than wander off and look out of the window and watch the rain fall and let the brain get into alpha, which is the brain waves that is where we are the most creative. It's like a bit of a light meditation. It gives us respite from the faster brain waves, which means so you might be watching the rain fall, or you just stare out of the window, which is really good for us. Rather than do that, handing away really, really quickly, and then we go off onto Facebook, and then we go off onto LinkedIn, and so even the things that we go on to that we think are respite, like Facebook, are not, because it's the same stuff. It's the same going on. So, that's one of the ways that the brain is processing the speed in which we're using technology, and that's one of the problems, our attention span. So my advice would be to rather than go off on Facebook, and I have to say, I lock myself out with a gizmo on my laptop that I just instruct it to, I can't get into Facebook for the next 12 hours or something, so that when I wander away from concentrating on what I'm creating on my laptop or emailing, I actually am staring out of the window and giving my brain some respite down to a sensible level.
Wow, that's an interesting tip. I just have another question. About the brain and stress, because I also want to, it's not just about adults, it's also about our children. And is there a difference in the child's brain? Stress for the child's brain, is that different?
The development, I am not an expert on the developing brain. However, we all know that the developing brain is doing millions of things at any one time. If I've got my little grandson who's 19 months old, and I'm looking at him, and I feel as if I'm almost looking inside his head, and I'm visualizing all of these amazing things going on as he's practicing his language, how he's dexterity. By the way, dexterity is really important with children, and I don't mean pressing keys. I mean actually using our fingers properly. Really important. And we used to do that, use it and practice it with sewing, making things, and we've stopped doing that. It's very wise if you're a parent or grandparent to encourage the little ones to practice dexterity for their development. However, I digress. Anything, I think children will actually naturally zone out. If you noticed, you're looking at a baby and you've got a baby in front of you and you are laughing or making faces like this, and the baby's responding, and then it starts to look round, or just stop, because you're not getting through, it's not happening, and wait for their attention to come back. So they have a lovely natural cut-off point where they want. So when a teacher says, "Oh, for goodness sake, pay attention," do you know what? No, they're doing it right. They've wandered off. They're head into a creative place, and when they come back, they will work even better. So it's a fine line, of course, especially if you've got 30 children in a class. But nevertheless, if you can maybe program these things in, where and then you bring them back and you program it out and bring them back, that's a good way. So the child's brain, I have found, is very good at working with technology because they switch off. Having said that, the games for the little ones, they're quite addictive, and they are concentrating. I've seen them on aeroplanes. They're sitting there with these little cameras, and they're concentrating for a very long time, which is not a natural thing to concentrate for that length of time on technology. Of course, again, you can argue that a little one would be, I don't know, if they're making sand castles on the beach, they can be doing that for hours and hours. But that is the brain waves in quite a creative way. It is a creative way. Again, the brain is in alpha. They are almost meditative, and they are creating beautiful things that, these fishes or these castles or whatever, and they're sand. So it's I think we have to be very mindful with technology with children. But what I find also we've got to be even more mindful of is, as parents or as adults or carers, that we're not on technology too much when we have our little ones around us. They need our attention. Very much so.
That's driving an important one, yes.
I was driving in just in the outskirts of London, and over there was the carriageway in the opposite direction, and beyond that was the pavement. Yes. And I looked across, it was a traffic jam, of course, and I looked across the road, and there's this woman with a buggy, pushing an empty buggy. There wasn't a child in it, but she was on her phone, pushing it with her body. The child was at least 50 metres behind her, and it was a carriageway. That child could have stepped out in front of a car, and I was so incensed with this woman. I thought, hey, your child is in danger. Pay attention. So, that's really stressful for the child, because there's like, they're parameters, and there's no interaction.
I agree. That is a very important part to address about high technology, is that we are so focused on all these things that are happening that we are not in connection anymore. Like you illustrate now with the child and the mother. What about where's the connection? Where is the responsibility? Because we are so distracted by everything that we forget the most important things in life.
Absolutely. And what the woman was teaching the child was that the technology was more important than integrating with the child. The child was missing out on learning from the mother, which is extremely important in those developing years. And all of those, the cues, the facial cues, what's dangerous, what isn't, and so on and so forth. And it's just, and then one day, for sure, this mother's going to want to find out what's going on in her child's life, and the child will be too busy looking at Gizmo, because that's what the child has been taught. This happens within the family unit. So that when it comes to the mother being older, going, so what should we talk about? Not gonna
I agree. Now, I've got another question for you around stress. As a psychiatrist, I just want to ask you that question. What would you give as advice to adults who are highly stressed? Is there a tip, or is there an exercise or something that you would advise them to do if somebody is really saying, I'm so highly stressed? What is the first thing that you would advise them?
I speak to a lot of people who are highly stressed. They're worrying terribly. I have a theory, and it is only a theory, and I'll share it with you and your viewers. My theory is that when we act like the human beings we know we are, we can stop ourselves becoming mentally ill a lot of the time. Not all of the time. But certainly we can divert stress, we can divert worry, we can divert anxiety disorder, we can even divert going into that dark place into depression. Not all the time, but more of the time than we think we can. We can be in control more than we realize it.
Yes.
And I demonstrated this to myself some years ago. May I tell you a little story?
Yes.
Yes, okay. A while ago now, some years ago, I was had a business meeting in London, in Fulham. And I parked my car one side of a park, and I walked through the park, and as I was going, I saw a man lying on a bench. He was asleep. There was dew from the air. He had his hands under his arms. He was really cold, but he was sound asleep. And he looked dirty, so clearly he was somebody who was homeless. I walked out of the park, and I went to an office and had my meeting. I came back into the park, and I walked back past the man a second time, and I got to the gate where my car was parked, and I stopped, and I thought, I just knew I couldn't get out of the park into my car. So I walked back past the man for a third time. I went out of the park, and I found a supermarket, and I bought a sandwich and an orange juice. I came into the park, and I very quietly approached the man because I didn't want him to wake. I just wanted him to stay asleep. And I put by his head the orange juice and the sandwich. I walked away, went out to the park, and I got in my car and left. I didn't talk about that for years, and I talk about it now to demonstrate a point. Because I did something altruistic, because I was the human being I know we all are, and I just did something without expecting anything in return. I put my brain in the best possible state imaginable, absolutely imaginable. That being kind, being generous with others puts us in a place where we are not focusing on our troubles. We open out our thinking. We open out, we're thinking of others, and we're putting our own problems in perspective. Now, chemically, what was going on there is I stimulated a substance called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is actually a neurogas and was discovered about 20 years or so ago, and the scientists got the Nobel Prize on the back of it. It's a vasodilator. It makes the blood vessels extend. It's found in medical medication for people with heart trouble. So it's stimulated by medicine. It's stimulated by diet. It's stimulated by exercise, but it's also stimulated by kindness, generosity, and altruism. And that is the basis of all my work. Everything I do is based upon that. So when we stimulate nitric oxide, what it does is it dampens down cortisol.
Yes.
Once cortisol, and then it also, which enables serotonin, dopamine, and the feel-good neurotransmitters to start firing.
Yes.
Brilliant. Why wouldn't you want to stimulate nitric oxide? It's fantastic. It's our new best friend. You know, it's like, I love nitric oxide. So, but of course, nitric oxide it's organic, so it's not going to be at this level. It's going to be doing this, which is perfectly normal. So therefore, when I look back at that time when I was very kind to this homeless man, although I stimulated my brain to be in the optimum state at that moment, the knock-on effect was for about 3 days, I could do no wrong. My work was brilliant. I was being creative. I was speaking. I was getting response. It was like, wow, this is so cool. So social psychologists would probably respond and say, well, okay, if you've just given something to someone else, that can't be an altruistic act because you've got
Mm,
something, you did get something back in return,
mm,
which is true. But my answer to that is, so what?
mm.
Just so what? I was kind to somebody who needed some kindness. I helped myself put my brain in the best state. It made me work better. I worked better, which meant my clients got a better service from me. And so it's like,
Mm.
that's my answer.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, to finish off the interview, I just, because I could talk hours with you. I mean, but time flies. So, Dr. Lynda, can you tell me one quote or one sentence or just something from the heart, short, that you would like to share to the audience? Something that you live for, something that is inspiring around stress, around behavior, around life, around whatever you want to share. Is there one quote, one sentence that you would like to share with the audience?
Okay. Your DNA is not your destiny. If you have members of your family who have anxiety disorder, depression, very stressful, or warriors, I have my mother's an amazing warrior. If you have people around you like that, that doesn't mean you're going to be the same. We are more than our biology, our chemicals. We're also products of our emotional, social, and cultural upbringing. So you eat change, okay? So please remember, your DNA is not your destiny. You can be much better controlled than you think you can.
I love that. It relates with the first step in my 7-step conscious self-care system, which is taking responsibility for yourself. Put your hands on the steering wheel of your own car. Don't sit in the back seat or the trunk. So
Absolutely.
it works against stress very well. Now, I want to thank you from the heart, Dr. Lynda. Thank you so much for your participation. It's such an interesting, it's a totally different angle, and I love it that we have all these different experts who give different angles. So thank you so much for your contribution. I'm saying thank you to the listeners. You know that you have other interviews to watch. You can go to the website, you can replay them, you can revisit this one. I am wishing you, the best, Dr. Lynda, and thank you so much for having me. And bye bye to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.